TSM had a bad split, and they were having a resurgence. Now it's on the other foot. CLG trying to come back and defend their championship title.
Well, we already see that matchup in the bot lane is going to get some bans to start. More Tom Kenches come out, and we'll see what kind of work TSM and CLG have done. Homework, that is.
Yeah, and one thing that's happened globally on the 6.15 patch is pretty much everyone, despite it being standard lanes all the time, has been going with the melee supports, except for Aframu, who played 3 Bard games and a Karma game in their quarterfinal victory. So very quickly, you can see TSM already targeting the Bard ban, and I wouldn't be surprised if Karma goes unbanned to see TSM pick it fairly early.
I actually am hoping for CLG to move towards those melee supports because Aframu looks his best when he's on a playmaking champion. There you go. They did ban out the Karma,
Yep.
but Aframu has been able to make a lot of plays for the team with the Bard. Now that that's gone, I expect him to go for maybe the Alistar or the Braum. Those are going to be the 2 supports probably traded in the matchup.
And a very bold pick by TSM right at the start, going for the Gangplank with Gnar still on the table. I feel like Gnar is a very favorable matchup against the GP. It's also what Darshan played every single game of the quarterfinal.
I've been talking to a lot of top laners on this because there's a heavy debate on the GP and Gnar matchup. And, you know, some of them are, oh yeah, Gnar's so great because early on, you can push him in, you can try and dive him. And then the other school of thought is, yes, well, Gangplank, all he has to do is survive. You don't die, then you get to Gangplank go at bottom. And, you know, he plays so much more for the team. He scales really well late. So there are, you know, win conditions for both sides of that matchup, and it really depends on the players. And as you said, Darshan has really had a penchant for the Gnar side.
Yeah, and based on recent results from pretty much all the playoff series we've been seeing, it seems like it's a Gnar favored matchup in most games as far as victory goes, but we don't see scrims. We're seeing a very small percentage of those games.
And the other factor that does play into that matchup, obviously, is going to be the junglers. Gragas is picked up here, has been such a premier jungler, huge playmaking, and can, you know, facilitate those dives that the Gnar side would want to do on the Gangplank. Let's see what TSM will answer with.
I'm very surprised the Ashe has made it this far as well. Having the global ultimate already for Hanser leaves Ashe to be safe on the backline if they can give it a Braum or something as well with a pick. Right now, it's the Nidalee Hover and Bjergsen to pick for the team.
Yeah, we've seen no marksman bans this game. It was actually relatively targeted when they threw the Olaf ban in right at the very end there. So we end up seeing the standard junglers, and TSM is going to wait a little while longer, I think, to see if they want to go with the Ashe or the Jhin. It seems like Doublelift would be more in the favor of the Ashe, even though other teams are in favor of Jhin, just because Doublelift does like to be a little bit closer to the enemy team.
CLG be very telling of their composition. They already want to run in with the Sivir. What are they going to lock it to? We had that Gnar for Darshan pretty much pegged at the start of this champion select when it was not picked up by Hanser. So what will the rest be is the question.
Probably a support choice and then wait for the last pick to try and get Huhi a counter.
I love saving counter pick for Huhi for Counter Logic game because he has been one of the mid laners with the most diverse champion pool. This was one of the guys to first pick up Aurelion Sol when he was released. First put in a lot of time on him, and roaming has been such a big part of mid lane. Taliyah, though, we've been seeing Taliyah first picked all across the world in playoffs in many different regions, and she's dropped so far down the list, makes me think that CLG do have a counter pick specifically for the Taliyah, because they know that Bjergsen does play it and has put in a lot of time on it.
Yeah, the bans left a lot open, actually. We see it. The mid really wasn't hit for either side too much. That Karma's there, but it left up what's going to provide a good game.
I do like the boldness from TSM to blind pick Cassiopeia, because a lot of people, you know, are very hesitant to do that due to, you know, assassins or something like that. But Cassiopeia has been Huhi's main weakness. We've seen him get solo killed by the champion by a couple different mid laners piloting the champion, and that has been something that he has struggled with. You know, not really giving enough respect to the chase down potential that Cassiopeia has. And sometimes, you know, the Cassiopeia will turn around ganks on him. So I'm very curious as to what they decide to go with here, because this has been one of his personal demons he's been battling with.
Yeah, and the counter pick up, he has played 2 Victor games, a Cinder game, and an Aurelion Sol game so far on the 6.15 patch. We were talking about Taliyah. He hovered it. Unfortunately, we have a bit of a spectator bug, but it looks like he's going with Aurelion Sol. So that's yet another one of those picks we say about his deep champion pool. Fly played it over in Korea for KT. and it synergizes quite well with the Sivir, and that's what CLG found success with in the 4th game of their quarterfinal matchup.
So much speed here for the CLG team, and they're going to need it because there's a lot of damage on TSM and a lot of long-range abilities here to pick off the back line there. Gangplank ultimate, Jhin ultimate, and the pillars from Biofrost. He's just going to try and use those pillars to get people into position so that they can land these long-range shots.
And I feel like the Aurelion Soul starts to work more even for CLG with the way the lanes work. There's not as much really action coming to Huhi. Everybody's ganking the side lanes, and he's been able to just farm, go back, continue to fly back to lane, farm, and push it in.
So many of the top mid laners right now have been talking about how mid lane's all about wave control and turning it into roams.
That's right.
Cassiopeia, one of the reasons she's kind of fallen off recently, doesn't have the same roaming threats, especially since she usually does take that ghost for extra teamfight mobility.
Yeah, and to me, that just tells me that Bjergsen's very confident in his ability to actually win lane. Like, not even have this be a farm matchup, but actually kill Huhi with himself or with the gank. And if they do that, that does open up the whole map, even if it's not a farm, clear, and roam strat.
You know the drill. This is where you get to participate more than just watching. As we load onto the Rift, let us know which team you are supporting by tweeting and using the hashtag TSMWin or the hashtag CLGWin. Man, everybody is ready. Are you? Because we know this one's going to be close. Let those team colors fly, and we'll check in with the votes in just a bit. The chants are starting. The Rift is opening up. Counter Logic Gaming versus Team SoloMid is on the Rift.
Yeah, and last week when CLG played in the playoffs, they brought out some new picks which were unique to them in the playoffs with a Syndra in the mid lane and an Olaf in the jungle. This is actually Doublelift's first Jhin game of the split. So no Jhin in the regular season, brings it out in the first game of playoffs. I love the synergy Jhin has with Gangplank specifically post level 6, because the GP ultimate can come down followed by the Jhin W, and that can set up a lot of picks. We'll see if TSM try to utilize that in the mid game.
Yeah, even earlier on though, if we do look at that bottom lane, I'm a little bit worried for the TSM squad because Sivir plus Soraka has so much control over the minion wave. All they have to do is mindlessly shove the wave. Early wave control is even more important now on 615 with the first turret gold, and we've seen so many teams turn early wave control into extra gold for snowballing with the first turret, and Aphromoo has gone once again to one of those range supports for an extra advantage versus the Trundle lane.
And speaking of the range supports for CLG, this is something they're very confident and comfortable and maybe even stubborn in continuing to do, because they were playing the range supports in the Spring Split playoffs. They brought the range supports to the Mid-Season Invitational, and they were beating the international mid lanes by 20 and 30 CS apiece. So much so that those other teams were thinking, you know what? You have to do it if it's a setup lane.
Actually close to the teams they were running at the Mid-Season Invitational.
And then no one else is doing it anymore, but CLG still is.
I like that CLG have a reason for doing it though. Okay, let's take a look at the action first here. Huhi and Bjergsen. As I said in the Champion Select, like this has been one of Huhi's personal demons. They talked about it in the video. You know, he struggled sometimes with, getting a lot of criticism, and most of the criticism is due to solo deaths or got played by the enemy mid laner. But
head it, Huhi. Just get one. Just one.
There you go. At least his time wasn't completely wasted there. He's going to get back in time before the melee dies. So this is a strategy why most of the mid laners have been talking about. It's all about mid lane wave control into roaming. Taliyah does the exact same thing. You push the first wave, move up, try and steal away from the enemy jungle. You also leave behind a trinket ward, which will help you keep track of Svenskeren, because that is going to be another very important matchup, as Smithy is going to try and clear out his red quadrant and get to level 3 on Gragas.
Nicely hit. I was going to say, Bjergsen actually took that first engage quite well. Usually you just take stars upside the head and you're kind of pushed out of lane. The other person doesn't fight back that much.
Bjergsen definitely ready for it. We do have to note that Huhi has a bit of a sustained advantage in this lane, starting with the Corrupting Potion. And since he's Aurelion Sol, he can just fly back to lane now that he's level 3. I wouldn't be surprised to see a very early recall from Huhi. There he goes, and he's just going to continue to try and shove Bjergsen in. And the breaker of that lane will be if Bjergsen can actually pressure him out before he has that E cooldown.
And one actually adaptation that Huhi's made, since MSI, is not using his E to actually get back to lane. He walks back to lane after that first buy and then tries to roam with it later on, so he doesn't use the cooldown there. coming back to lane. And the side lanes do have to watch out because as I thought the Sivir Soraka lane was going to be perma shoving under the turret there, down bottom, Doublelift and Biofrost actually have it move right up into the middle of the lane. And we'll see if the junglers make anything happen because currently Svenskaren's topside counter jungling. He might go for a top lane gank there, which would signify to CLG that they would have more control over bottom lane. But as of right now, Sven has not shown himself up top.
I'm really curious where Svenskeren decides to go because he doesn't quite have eyes on Xmithy, and the counter gank would be a possibility. This should see him, though. Darshan's going to have to be pretty creative in his escape here.
You can't hop onto Rek'Sai.
Yep. Oh, no. Well, you can try to. Definitely going to get pushed out of lane on that.
You can hop on him, not off of him.
There we go. You don't get the double jump because he knocks you up. That's a pretty big pressure advantage right there. It's going to allow Haunter to not fall behind in this critical matchup, although Darshan does go double Thorns, and now Xmithy tries with natural response. TSM already there to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to harass him on this Krug to make sure he doesn't get it. Smithy's waiting for the smite right now, by the way. Smithy knows that this is the right play because obviously the numbers up on the top side of the map.
Oh, that's the roam!
Here comes Suhi. They're actually low on mana to get this going in. He takes so much damage from the outside. First blood to Aphromu, and nobody takes the aggro to get taken down by the turret.
We talk about CLG's map play right there, and that's a perfect example. It wasn't a lane swap, but it was a very strategic roam play. Xmithy was down there being harassed by the support, which meant Doublelift was isolated on the turret, which meant Huhi came in, and it all works at the same time.
All of the little things we set up, the Huhi roam, the Smithy counter jungle, they all came to fruition at the same time here for CLG, and it's a very easy dive for that first blood. Huhi saved his E, he used it to go roam instead, and they just capitalized very quickly there on Svenskeren showing top, and all that TSM got out of it was the top flash.
Yeah, the icing on the cake for CLG is that Haunter completed his teleport down bottom, which means he has to go all the way back to base and run all the way back to lane, essentially invalidating the pressure advantage that Svenskeren gave him earlier with the gank onto Darshan.
Because usually what he's going to give up is a huge amount of minions. As of right now, actually, there is a huge amount of minions, and Haunter will get back to lane in time for this wave to crash. The thing is, whenever a big wave builds, you have to worry about what's the enemy team going to do to try and deny it to you, and Smithy's getting in with early wards.
You have CLG going for that early 5-minute top lane push. TSM sent Biofrost early and have opted to keep Doublelift farming solo. The question is, can they hold this, and is CLG going to try and dive?
CLG playing the map like they've almost lane swapped it. They said, you know what, turrets can still be in the same spot, we just won't lane swap. We'll rotate as much as we used to anyway. And they continue to put pressure on the top just before the bottom side of the map. Doublelift trying to retaliate now with a little bit of pressure.
And TSM with a pretty easy read there for the top play. However, no wards for Doublelift, and he is very far up at the turret. This is a level 6 Aurelion Sol, though.
Pulls off for now.
Smart of Doublelift to pull off right there. And just because people aren't lane swapping early doesn't mean they can't still lane swap later. As soon as the fortification is gone from the top lane turret, CLG has been very disciplined about going up there as soon as possible.
Yeah, the thing is, it's not a very complicated strategy, right? So TSM able to read it there, see the possibility, and they got the defense in place. TSM are actually slightly ahead in gold, even though they gave up that first blood. So they have been able to control the minions. They have been able to recoup a lot of those losses that they suffered in the dive.
Definitely seems like CLG was kind of setting themselves up. Looking back at that play, we wondered, why isn't the Sivir pushing out? Why is it so slow? They had a huge wave when they were able to dive Doublelift under that turret. So it almost just says, hey, we'll set up this wave. McSmithy's going to be in the jungle. Maybe at that time we have Huhi as well. And they got the 4-man dive on bot lane. Not something we've really seen from CLG lately. So as they said, continuing to evolve and continue to get better towards this playoff.
Yeah, and in this pause, TSM has paused because of a suspected bug on CLG, so they're actually investigating that right now. But I do want to talk about the goal distribution that Kobe was touching on a little bit earlier, and how it is a little bit unlucky that Aphromu did get that first blood, since both of CLG's solo lanes are already down in gold. Substantially show for Darshan, actually. He's 400 gold down onto Haunter, and that is a matchup that is very snowbally if Gnar can get ahead and get an early Frozen Mallet. But if he doesn't get there, he actually loses that advantage.
Yeah, and that's why it was so important that both teams focused on that big minion wave as an objective in itself. And they both sent, 4 members of their team up to the top side. Because TSM got their defense in place, so much of that gold picked up by Hanser. And obviously, Gangplank does get that bonus gold because Hanser got most of the last hits with his barrel on the Q proc. So that's where a lot of that extra gold is coming in for TSM. Exactly where you want the Gangplank to be. We've been touching on that Gnar Gangplank matchup so heavily, and it's getting to the stages where Hanser now does have the ultimate and he can affect the rest of the map.
Exactly. Darshan's teleport is still down. There is a reason that people are still willing to pick GP into Gnar. They don't just watch another region and be like, that guy didn't do it. Like, there's experience for these teams that shows the GP beating the Gnar. Whether or not that is going to be proven false in the future, we don't necessarily know yet, but we do know that it swings both ways. And I think the biggest reason for that is how swingy a Frozen Mallet Gnar can be. If Gnar gets to Frozen Mallet before you can defend him and you're in a long lane, he will chase you down and kill you over and over again. But if you can deny him to a point where he's squishy for going to that Frozen Mallet and you can kill him a bunch, whether it's ganks or out farming, then it can swing in Gangplank's favor.
Right. Get a few ganks in there, make sure you don't get Hanser under level for staying in lane too long, and that's kind of what they did. They popped Darshan once, gave Hanser a bit of an advantage, and they've left him alone.
It is just completely different strengths. Gangplank looking to scale, affect the rest of the map.
Yeah.
Gnar looking to chase you down and get early kills. The early kills have not come through, so Gangplank definitely sitting pretty here. It looks like they have cleaned up all the suspicions, and we'll get back into the game.
Right down to the mid lane is where we will drop back in. Pretty even on this CS after we saw a bit of a scuffle back and forth. He waiting on his exhaust to come back up if they were to go back and forth. No real kill pressure there, so should just be who he's roam still. We can already see that happening now. Power in numbers as CLG keeps the early game in movement.
And vision is going to be incredibly important in this game because the first turret is put at such a premium for both these teams. Where will the supports and the ADs go, and who can get the first big unanswered push on a turret? That's going to mean first turret and a big advantage, and vision is what sets that up.
Look at all the focused mid lane here for CLG. They're prepping a dive. He just went for a trade, got the Thunderlord's proc, and got him down to half life. But that ward right there is going to ruin all of CLG's plans, and Brixton will just play safe. So everyone returns to lane. How many minions will Darshan miss? I believe at least one melee.
Yeah, and this is actually really interesting to watch. Darshan is bottom lane at level 6, nearing Mega Gnar. His turret has more health, and the push top lane is pretty relentless by Stixxay and Afro. I'd almost imagine Hanser's going to have to use his ultimate to clear that wave.
You don't say.
There is a possibility, how hard do you want to all in on getting that first turret? Where Darshan could have teleported on one of those minions to try and burst it down, but they didn't go for it. Now the bottom lane's going to lose.
Mega Gnar out soon. The pressure is just to get the turret. And Hanser being able to delay this one would be pretty good. Go ahead and throw him off. The exhaust is actually pulled out as well, so Darshan gets a bit of success for himself there. The roam from who he is just on the outside here. He's going to have to throw this at an angle. He won't be able to follow. He throws it too far behind. And TSM is going to have to blow flashes, but they get out safely and still trade that turret.
He still gets 3 flashes. Yeah. So this is actually...
Yeah, that works out.
Not to mention the turret is traded in the top side. So that's a play that's good, but not great for TSM, since they did split the gold amongst 3 members, and there's no massive dump of 650 gold into Double's pocket.
See actually how that went. About 15 right now for Stixxay to spend as they did that on the top side and gave him a little bit more. CLG trying to keep the pressure on. It's what they need to do for TSM's early game. They have one of the best.
Yeah, and CLG so far playing a little bit conservatively there. Not willing to risk too much on the first tower race, going for that early gold to try and snowball. Take the defensive play. We'll just take a couple flashes, and we'll let you have that small amount of extra gold that they get for the first turret. Now, the crucial thing will be to watch, can CLG actually punish TSM for those flashes? They have to keep the timer on all 3 of those. The bottom lane, very vulnerable. This is a Jhin, no self-escapes. Now he has no flash, so it's a perfect target for both Huhi as well as jungle pressure from Smithy.
Yeah, teams talk about how because top laners have teleport and mid lane is so roam focused, the center of the team is actually the AD. So when the AD and support have no flashes, it sets up a lot of opportunity, especially when you have a Gragas with flash. Although the attention for CLG looks to be elsewhere. Oh, nice juke.
Hanser says, no thank you, I drink responsibly. Oh, it's gonna be the start call. Not start call, but Huhi calling the stars, I should say, to take down Hanser. And it looks like they're gonna be able to get that one.
Yeah, CLG just take the opportunity that presents itself to them. Yeah, there's no flashes for the dual lane, but top lane is really pushed very far. Now we're in a situation where TSM are shoving mid and bottom, and they can collapse onto this first Cloud Drake here and take the Drake as the price to pay for Hanser's death.
And the interesting thing about this game is while CLG is the ones dancing around and making all the flashy plays, TSM are actually the ones that are winning the game. They're up by 500 gold, plus they're going to be able to pick up the first Cloud Drake uncontested.
One of the mysteries. TSM kind of eludes all the danger that hits them. They got out of that with Flash, leaves everybody up to be strong enough to get this dragon. Well, they do lose pressure on the top side. Like you said, up in gold, usually in the regular season, up around 1,600 in gold.
Look at the importance of this Gangplank ultimate for clearing out waves. CLG setting up a deep dive, and now they're caught.
Nice silence by Aphromoo, seeing that out.
They still have Bjergsen coming to cut him off, though. Oh, good barrel slow right there.
This game is keeping you anxious right now, and even more so.
You were speaking of being anxious.
Oh, my
Let's calm down there a little bit.
It's like CLG is moving around all antsy, but it's a with method to their madness. They know what they're doing. It's like they can't sit in lane for more than a minute and a half, and they say, we have to roam. We have to go do something, create more pressure. And they've been quite successful. Like we said, still behind in gold, but they're setting themselves up to catapult pretty hard here.
They're teasing us. Every time we start getting amped up and ready to go, pause, calm back down. Amp you up again? All right, this time it's actually a Bjergsen issue.
Yeah, so Bjergsen is complaining about the same bug, and it's apparently a visual bug of Aurelion Sol's passive. So he said he was going to play through it, and if it happens again, they were going to pause again. And so to speak, it has happened again, so we were paused again, and they're currently working on a solution. Or thinking about a solution. One of the two.
As of right now, CLG have made their escape, by the way, from that tense situation. So the pause came after CLG exited the base, going for that very risky dive, honestly. They keep focusing on Hanser, and I have to say, especially taking into account the recent playoff games that we've seen across the world on everyone focusing on this Gangplank, one of the biggest strengths is dealing with a bunch of pressure. The wave clear with the barrel chains and with the ultimate specifically has saved them a couple times, clearing out crucial minion waves to earn advantages. You talk about TSM winning the game so far. That first turret gold was very big in getting them this little gold advantage, and clearing out that wave here on the top side again kind of earned them, extra pressure to get that Drake as well. So a lot of the objectives are from soaking up a lot of pressure and focusing on the minions. People really underestimate the gold that comes from the minion waves, and that is really how you play this game in the early stages. It's more of a chess game, working around which minion wave you can actually clear to get an objective.
Yeah, and CLG, even if we think back to the spring split playoffs, have beaten TSM by kind of enforcing their game style onto TSM. In the spring, it was 1-3-1. Currently, it just seems like as much map play as possible. And it's funny that we saw the Huhi feature before now, where Aphromoo and Xmithy were talking about how they had to tell Huhi, no, just win your lane, let's get some wards. He has been roaming so much. He is down 24 CS to Bjergsen. He's helping others, but it's hard to say whether or not it's actually working because the game is so close right now.
I do like it. Definitely got to play to your strengths. He's on a roaming champion. Go for the roams.
Well, a lot of those roams we've seen have been with Aphromoo side by side as they make their way, clearing out wards. So he's still kind of keeping him in there. He's got that little leash on him, saying, nope, can't go that far. And it's been coming up very strong for him. Already 2 assists for Huhi. Aphromoo did pick up that first blood, but they were still able to get a kill over to Stixxay. So the bot lane matchup coming out in CLG's favor to start this one off. We wondered how it would play out as Aphromoo goes back to the range champions. And now we're 11 minutes in. Second pause, trying to figure this one out here. But as I was saying right before we hit this pause, TSM on average of 1,600 plus gold at 15 minutes. CLG's regular season was -7, so basically even with the other team. Imagine having that every game, and that's why you are #1 in the league. CLG, however, has basically been able to stave that off this time and can probably get themselves a really good mid game here. I
actually do like the way that both teams are playing this. Both teams are playing, to their strengths. They're trying to have the Gangplank absorb, play, around the ultimate and focus on the objectives. And CLG are trying to play their roaming strengths here. The thing is, another really cool stat that we did collect is the amount of deaths pre-15 minutes where a player has died by themselves, basically these solo deaths. And CLG have the #1 solo desk as AD carry, the #1 solo desk as mid laner, and the #1 solo desk for a top laner. So
or X-Smithy, dude.
a lot, yeah, exactly. All of the lanes for CLG,
Jungler, please.
they have the most solo desks, by themselves. So this is really a team where it's just like your ranked queue games where you're like, please group up and stop getting picked off and dying. TSM actually have a lot of pick here with the Gangplank ult and the Jhin. They might actually try and punish that weakness of CLG.
All right, while the referees take a moment to assess the situation on Bjergsen's computer, we are going to go ahead and send it over to the analyst desk.
Thank you very much, Riv. An unfortunate visual bug stalling us out here for just a moment, but it's going to give us a unique opportunity to kind of put the early game, this very early game, under a microscope from both of these teams. We did have a lot of questions about how TSM is going to play around first turret. What's the practice been like for them in their 2 weeks, considering that bye week, and how will they stack up against CLG here? They do manage to actually secure the first blood turret this time around. Before we dive into the gameplay, though, let's talk champ select. Aurelion Sol coming out in game 1 out of Huhi as a response to the Cassiopeia.
I think you have to know this is coming as TSM. They were probably preparing to play against the Aurelion Sol. I think when you look at their bans, you think maybe they could have fitted in there instead of one of the other ones, but I think they're trying to limit the early game options. I know Aurelion Sol does have those, but they want to keep it off Smithy with the Olaf or something like that. So I can respect going for more targeted bans of other people.
I think the biggest surprise for me for TSM's draft is the fact that they're running a composition that doesn't involve a whole lot of diving and a whole lot of just go buttons. You don't really have a whole lot of tools. You have the Gangplank to kind of scale and stall out the game, but the most part, the biggest tanks are just Rek'Sai and the Trundle,
right? And
your engage is basically double lifts ult and his root, which is not something that we've seen before, as he usually takes either the Ashe, the Sivir, or the Lucian. And, it's a little bit iffy because that kind of composition revolves so much around the objective and as well as having the opponent run into you. But luckily, CLG picks the exact same thing,
right,
to run into you.
I think it's very interesting, too, because I actually like CLG's draft a little more. I think it falls off a little bit in the late game because Aurelion Sol, a lot of people say.
Sivir never falls.
Sivir, no, but Aurelion Sol definitely does fall off. And I think they have a lot of speed ups, they have a lot of engaged dive tools early, and so I think you've already seen that they've been able to use that pretty well, and this seems like a pretty well practiced comp for them. And I really like the fact that we're seeing this game 1 because it's going to change TSM's bans, assuming they can stay on the track where they're making some plays.
Well, we've put a spotlight on the mid lane through the past couple series and talking about the importance of roams, getting those champions that have the ability to leave the mid lane throughout the early game. That's exactly what CLG does here. We have that early push forward from Huhi to get that back at level 3, have a little bit of extra power under his belt, and then that roam to the bot lane. 4:30 into the game, you've got a level 4 Aurelion Sol visiting along with a Gragas for a 4-man dive on a double lift. That's a big pickup for them, to get that first blood down into that bot lane.
And the critical thing about that was Hui's decision making to save his E, to not use it to get back into the lane. You save it for the actual roam. So it's long communicated, hey, we're looking to make a play towards the bottom side of the map. We know it's been scaring us on the top side. We have Smithy down here. And the second that Biofrost separates, they just see double lift on his own in that minion wave. And the silence from Soraka just makes this all too easy. A nice little dive. And you get the TP out from GP, which just gives you basically nullifies the lane in the top side.
Now, we haven't talked too much about that top lane matchup. Once again, we're seeing the GP into the Gnar, so TSM prioritizing that GP very heavily with the first pick here. But he played the lane quite well in terms of farm. We saw a pretty big gold advantage out of Hauntzer just due to farm in those first early levels, in part because he was able to shove a wave into turret top and then TP down and catch that wave that Double have then missed. But definitely, as of right now, in the current game state, Hauntzer is finding the gold where he needs.
Right, and I think one thing that was interesting was CLG went for their kind of almost patented at this point flip to the top side, but the Aurelion Sol didn't join them, so TSM was actually able to hold on with 3, and it shows that TSM is a team that they're not flustered. They were prepared for CLG's strategy. We know, like I said, they know they're giving up the Aurelion Sol. They're probably okay understanding that something's going to come from this Aurelion Sol pick early, and I think that they're in a decent spot given that they should outscale pretty hard.
I'm glad you brought that point up where CLG roams towards the top side, trying to make that, I guess, patented 5-man push toward, or 4-man push for the top turret, but it was a bit disappointing to see them get pigeonholed into, hey, Gangplank has amazing wave clear. You can't just take this turret, and even though they're the ones that made the first move to the top side, TSM find themselves giving Double Lift that solo farm, that solo XP to the bot side, and eventually is able to take that first turret over CLG, who are the ones making the first move.
Well, and that's where I think we return to Mark's point about the fact that they did do this patented swap, if we're going to call it that, but they really only did it with 2 people. They had Soraka, Sivir hard pushing that top lane, the 2 of them against the GP, while Darshan was attempting to defend. But of the two junglers, Sven was the one who showed up to actually pressure the turret, while GP was able to use his ult to clear waves and stave off the aggression just long enough for that first turret gold.
Right. Well, the initial swap right away, I think CLG, if they had brought Aurelion Sol, need to go for a dive. So that's what makes competitive top-tier League of Legends so hard, is that there's so many little variables you need to understand are different. Versus a Rumble and a GP, you really need to dive him. You can't just push the wave in, you need to kill him.
Yeah.
Because otherwise he's going to wave clear.
Speaking of little variables to that, usually when you see that play work, it all depends on the back timings of the dual lane. So if you have a different back timing, so CLG maybe recalls while TSM is in lane, they can easily surprise the top side. But because they made that play in the bottom side a couple minutes earlier, TSM, Double Lift was already dead, so he goes straight to the bottom. But Bifrost, he's got a lot of free time. He just recalled at the same time the CLG did, so he's able to respond to these plays.
Right.
And they have multiple people right on time. So you see him wetting the tri-brush while CLG is getting up there, which makes that play that much harder for them to pull off. So maybe a little bit too tunnel vision onto the plan and not onto the adaptation.
And unfortunately for CLG, you've got a Gnar defending who does not have GP level wave clears, so he doesn't have the ability to stack up against them. Now, what I do want to touch on as a result, though, of this first blood turret is the fact that it didn't go to any one specific person. Because, once again, we see two teams locked in a race for that first turret gold, we're not seeing 650 spike onto one individual. So if we return to our earlier conversation today about how important is first turret really and where does it matter the most, we are seeing an example of where the gold being distributed as it is probably isn't going to mean the make or break point of an item spike for a TSM member.
And I think you could even argue that it would have been great to get it onto Darshan. He's probably the most important person in this single matchup here, where if he gets far enough ahead of the GP, he can kind of snowball and keep him pressured in, dive, take turrets, whatever. And when you go for this kind of swap, one, it's rarely going to have very much on to Darshan, because even if you don't get it right away, he's going to go flip to the bot side and defend the turret. So there's rarely an instance where a lot of this gold ends up on Darshan, where in this particular game, it would be best to get it on him. So maybe you say, why even swap there? Just go back bottom. You just got to dive. You should have an advantage in that bot lane.
And that swap also netted TSM a pretty free dragon. They were able to get hands on that Cloud Dragon that I actually think is going to be rather important for them to be able to not only play defensively against the likes of a Sivir composition that's rather easy to get away from, but on their own agenda, making sure that you can get yourself closer, speed yourself up with the Jhin, and trying to answer whatever CLG is trying to move around the map. You know with Sivir, they like to out-rotate. They like to play that kind of
Dealing
style.
with the Aurelion Sol, too. We already saw the effectiveness of the Aurelion Sol roams. At least now with Cloud Drake, maybe we can match some of those roams that are put together by CLG. Now my question to you is, given the very early state of the game still, and from what you've seen so far, how does this game play out? What is the preferred strategy for, say, CLG or TSM to push forward? Are we looking for, very much CLG to run the kind of 1-3-1, keep the map spread, and use the likes of Sivir rotations and Aurelion Sol rotations to catch people out? We looking to group and dive turrets? What would be the suggestion here?
I think CLG needs to play fast from here. They need to keep trying to push waves into turrets and meet those waves with a dive from Aurelion Sol and Gragas, and basically make these five-man plays and hope that the GP ult doesn't crush you during them, because I think once you get into the later portions of the game, while TSM's comp might be a little harder to play, you would argue, you do start controlling objectives really hard. And I think that's what TSM needs to do, is just wait till 25 minutes, you get some tank items, you do more damage, and then you just start controlling buffs and things like that.
And to be more specific as to playing fast, you just saw Huhigo roam towards the bot side after losing that turret to the bottom lane in the three-man push, and burn 3 flashes. You burn the flashes of Trundle, Jhin, and Rek'Sai. If you just return to the dual lane and you're able to make a 5-man play onto that, that should be enough to get a window to maybe even push a tier 2 turret with the likes of the Sivir. That it just would be so effective for them. But if they slow down, GP scales and GP wins.
All right, so here's the thing. We just had a whole large discussion about this game and its current game state.
Oh,
Give it to me. I'm sorry to do this to you guys. Now, unfortunately for us as viewers, TSM have been offered a remake because of the bug, which they have accepted. So we will be remaking Champion Select for a new game with Aurelion Sol disabled now. So there's going to be some serious implications here with that champion being out for this series, but he will be disabled for the remainder of the series. We are going to take a short break while the team's ready up for that match. So stay tuned. We're restarting Game 1 between TSM and CLG. More League of Legends after the break.
Hello and welcome back, League fans. We are gearing up for Game 1 following a remake due to an Aurelion Sol visual bug experienced by both teams. I want to give Chad a quick second to discuss what was actually being seen by the players in game.
Yeah, we watched it multiple times with the vision toggle in this game, and if you remember right before the pause, there was that skirmish down on the bottom side. Afremu had flashed on Soraka to interrupt Doublelift's ultimate on Jhin, and then as they were running up towards blue buff, TSM actually had a ward in the blue buff, and off on the side you could see Aurelion Sol's orbs orbiting around, but he wasn't actually there. He was in mid lane. Because TSM saw the orbs, they pulled back. Bjergsen most likely had a kill onto Afremu, but because of the visual bug, they inferred the wrong knowledge. And that bug had happened a couple of times throughout the game, so they ultimately decided to remake and disable Aurelion Sol.
Even in the first time, Bjergsen was kind of saying, actually, we'll see if this just plays itself out, because as it was going, that game was quite even.
Yeah, it's a really rough situation. I'd say probably more so for CLG, because they're the ones that have who's been playing Aurelion Sol for so long, and now they can't play it in the series.
Definitely going to be unfortunate for them. But this is part of the, you guys have to regroup now and go to plan B.
Yeah, or just your game 2 strat, and now you might have a 6-game series. We just got to see the picks and bans from that last game, and I think we should just talk about, like, these teams had 5 minutes to regroup after they had accepted the remake. They're coming back on stage. They have to make a new plan with one fewer champion in the pool. What are they going to do?
And a lot of the picks and bans, or the bans, I should say, surprised us as well. There was a lot left up in there. The Shen was still left up for the top laners to be playing. We saw the Gnar versus GP matchup, however, and we still may see it. But looking at what was left open, there's so much that we could still see in this series. Definitely didn't go the way of the we thought in the first picks and bans.
Absolutely. So Aurelion Sol's gone. We saw CLG actually had counter picks in both of their solo lanes in the last match. It was a first pick GP for Hanser. They had a lot of lane pressure in the top side due to Svenskaren's Rek'Sai, and CLG had been roaming the map very aggressively and kind of accelerated the pace of the game, but TSM was matching it via farm.
And that's something CLG was always doing. It's something they did at MSI. It's something they used to do back when Afremu ran Morgana, and they'd go from lane to lane, killing whoever they could. It seems like they're much more methodical about setting that up and having to do it under towers now. Especially against TSM, you wonder if they can do this every early game. Can they beat the #1 early game team?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a possibility here. The other thing is that Talia was also unbanned, and Talia can be played in a similar way to Aurelion Sol, who you can one-shot the backline early on and get some kind of wave control and then try and roam around as well. She doesn't roam as well pre-6 as Aurelion Sol does, though. Let's just jump in here, and bans starting off the same, at least with both targeted bans here for the supports.
Yeah, remember Aurelion Sol was the very last pick in the draft. The support bans remained the same. There was also an Olaf ban for TSM at the end of the draft and a Karma ban for CLG at the end of the draft in the first game, which was just remade.
Olaf, Karma, so we're going to see the same thing in that sense for the bans. First pick here for Hanser, as he gives him the smile off. He will pick up the gangplank.
And that was one part of TSM's game that was going according to plan. He was soaking up damage on the top side, clearing multiple very important minion waves on the top side, which earned them very small advantages. One wave means the difference between getting first blood or first brick on the turrets. And actually, the champ select is going exactly the same. Maybe they do just plug in and repeat with Talia taking the place of Aurelion Sol.
Yeah, I think the biggest place you'd see a variance maybe would have been in the bottom side if the Trundle lane had been going too poorly against the Soraka Sivir, but we don't even see that here. It's the exact same first 5 picks.
Yeah, the only really bad thing that was going on in that lane was the roam from CLG early on. Smithy went for the invade, who he backed him up with a roam from mid lane as well on Aurelion Sol at the level 5, and they killed Doublelift. That caused them to lose the wave that resulted in him being down in CS also, but before that, it was extremely even.
Very close to being the same. That Gnar is definitely going to get locked in. I wouldn't see Darshan going to anything else. I know definite, very fierce word to use. I think he's got it.
I know when CLG played SKT in the finals of MSI, they did exactly the same pick bans in game 1 and 2. It's like, you want us to remake? We're going to do the same champions. Except they can't pick Aurelion Sol. So there'll be at least one tweak.
Big fan of the run back.
Yeah. And it's looking like a run back. 7 for 7 so far of identical champs picked. 8 for 8. 9 for 9 with blocks. Now we get to see the variants.
Oh my
This is the moment we've been waiting for.
Oh, no, his heart. Oh, unlucky.
Yeah.
Crushed Aurelion Sol's broken dreams.
Yeah. Honestly, though, yeah, my best guess would be just to plug and play there with the Talia instead.
Yep. That's exactly it. I mean, it can be a similar style for sure as far as the early shove and then the roaming. It's just a champion he's probably not as masterful on because he's been playing Aurelion Sol since MSI.
Yeah. So good thing is, all of our stories that we were setting up before still reapply. We'll have to reset up each story here. Huhi roaming, Smithy going for the counter jungling, bottom lane focus. You always do have to worry about the Gangplank and his ability to clear those waves. That has been, that was one of the things that was going really well for TSM. So maybe we'll see small adjustment from TSM, team play wise rather than in champion select, because that is something they can, try and account for. The problem is that even if you focus on the bottom side, once Hunter does get level 6, the Gangplank ultimate can also be used across map rather than on himself to clear waves. That's why he's so high priority right now. Very versatile, has a lot of different options with answering that.
We'll see what happens as they get into this game. You got to always think in a best-of-5 series, game 1 is kind of the equal to looking at the first few pitches. You can figure the team out, their aggression, how they may want to play this series. You never want to lose it. You don't want to let those games go. You're not just going to bunt one out, but you want to figure out what CLG is doing because they do counter logic. Head back over to Twitter, hashtag TSM win, hashtag CLG win. We're going to lock and load this one once more as we get back onto the Rift. We're going to see Counterlogic Gaming and TSM head off once again as CLG looks for the chance to defend their title in Toronto. And that's going to start right here against TSM.
Yeah, a lot of Worlds implications on the line. What we do know for sure is the winner of this series will be going to Worlds for sure.
No, that's true.
It's
because the points on that, yeah.
Right, and the reason is because both of these teams are the teams with the most championship points, obviously, from Spring Split, because this was the finals of Spring Split.
They got those nice swelled up piggy banks full of championship points that will allow them. Dash will discuss them at the end of the day, as he loves to do.
Yeah, in fact, even if CLG finishes 4th, if TSM wins the whole split, CLG still goes to Worlds on points.
It's true.
So if you are a CLG fan, you're going to have to be a TSM fan in finals if TSM beats you here.
Honestly, it feels
crazy.
like on the inside of every CLG fan, there's a little bit of TSM fan there. That's the little devil in them. And same thing
The other shoulder.
You're going to get a lot of angry tweets for that one.
Same thing for the TSM fans, honestly. I mean, they're like blood brothers, really. The two oldest teams. It's a very long relationship that these two teams share.
The two families, right?
Yeah, I mean, did you know that Reginald himself has actually played for CLG in our history?
Our?
Yes, our. Did you know
give
that
you
I
that.
also have played
I'll
for
give you
CLG?
that. You have the medal.
I have to say, there's most players. Never mind. All right, let's get back into this game because there is not going to be an early invade, it looks like.
Coco,
And
sit
both
down.
duos are going to start their camps, Grump and Krugs. We'll see how quickly they can get to lane. Should be fine for them, for both, honestly.
Yeah, and no harassment on the early camps either. Both junglers starting with an early pull. When this situation happened between Xmithy and Dardoch in the quarterfinals, I almost always preferred Xmithy's pathing. So I'm really curious to see where he's going to decide to gank first. The conventional wisdom would be you'd think he's going bottom lane, but I wonder if he's going to switch things up.
What would we see from him in that switch?
Yeah, so he has a lot of different options. Rek'Sai skips blue buff most of the time. So sometimes you'll see the Gragas take the red buff and then go immediately to the blue buff, which is why Svenskeren has left a trail ward at his own blue.
And Huhi this time around goes for the wave shove and gets 2 Raptors. Has improved since last game, so those little adjustments CLG already making from the last game. The thing that with Gragas, he has so many options. Actually, one of my favorites is something that LPL junglers do a lot, the Chinese junglers. They actually start on red, will get an immediate level 2 and go for ganks. But here, yeah, Huhi once again goes for that jungle invade. Does chunk out Svenskeren and actually doesn't lose anything, as doesn't get cut off by Bjergsen when he heads back to lane. So Huhi, again, making his presence felt.
Yeah, great to see. Very, very comfortable using that passive speed of being next to walls to make himself continuously in motion, giving hell to Svenskeren. He obviously smites his red buff and gets himself back on his way, but it doesn't seem to phase Huhi here coming back into the second game. He's still adding the same pressure.
Yeah, what's super interesting here is it looks like Svenskeren is going with an incredibly similar route to what he did in game 1, where he took his red buff, and now he's actually looping back up around and could probably just even go for the counter jungle of the Krugs, which will be later, and Xmithy's doing a completely standard full clear. So the situations that happened in game 1 are actually kind of repeating themselves.
All the way from Champion Select.
There's the ward, just cut it off. Well done, Huhi.
Flew over. This will help Bjergsen get his wave cleared out. Hanser and Darshan going to be clean for now. Haven't gotten that presence from Svenskeren to the top lane just yet. But we might see it after this blue delivery.
Yeah, does get handed off the blue, loses 1 melee to the tower for his efforts, but that is really going to help as far as the shove is concerned and trying to keep up with Talia. Who he, though, will get the first back, will get back quicker. Negatron Cloak already going to try and protect himself from the all-ins of Cassiopeia. One of those stories that we were setting up in the last game in Champ Select, talked about how Cassiopeia has been one of the champions that who he has had the most difficulty with. One of his personal demons that he's been trying to deal with is getting solo killed by that champion, and Bjergsen, definitely one of the most fearsome mid laners that we have in all of the North American LCS. So early Negatron Cloak, actually no surprise here.
All right, that actually plays into kind of what Alphamu and the team was saying. You kind of lose concentration in mid lane. If you do that against a champion like Cassiopeia, you could instantly be deleted very quick. Take a few steps forward too far. Bjergsen will know exactly what to work. 34 to 34. CS from throughout the season is actually pretty close by these guys. Bjergsen's around 8 CS. And then he's going to be around 7.1, 7.5 CS as they continue to farm per minute. So that lane should stay pretty even.
Gank approaching in the top side.
Oh, they're going for it.
Daryl's actually going to try to stop Xmithy. Very nicely seen as he plays himself out of that one.
Yeah, good flash there from Hanser. Definitely necessary not to die on the Gangplank in this matchup early on. This is the dynamic of the Gangplank Gnar that we talked about. Very different strikes for these two champions, but both of them can be, played to very early on in the game. Now he has no flash though, and the wave is pushing against him, or away from him. So Hanser can actually, or Darshan can keep this wave right in front of his turret. This is a very bad spot for Hanser because he's not even level 6 yet, doesn't have access to the ultimate.
Yeah, and something that did happen while the gank was approaching in the top lane is Bjergsen did get Huhi's flash in the mid lane. So we were talking about how he's going to struggle against Cassiopeia. Already down flash, had to burn through all of his potions, and now he's not the first one to level 6 either. So Bjergsen definitely trying to make his presence felt in that mid side.
That positioning as well as he starts to go kind of horizontal to Huhi. Has the ward and Raptor Brush so he can really start to play aggressive. And this could be where that starts to play, Kobe, where he starts to fall behind against this Cassiopeia. Bjergsen's closer and closer, and the next few waves are going to be at the turret.
Yeah, you can see Bjergsen playing aggressively. As you mentioned, Jat, when we were talking about the summer selection as well, Bjergsen is very clearly playing this to try and get kills onto Huhi. We talked about the stats for all of the lanes of CLG. In their roles, most solo deaths all across the map for them. And TSM want to try and punish that. Bjergsen's starting to play aggressively here, and they've got wards around mid lane. That's the most important part when you want to play that style.
Yeah, and I think CLG need to ward quite well as well right now because both their solo laners are without flash, and Svenskeren is in their jungle. So Xmithy either needs to find that or be there for a little bit of protection. I'd say more so for the mid lane than for the top right now because of Meganar, but if he goes mini, that could be very dangerous.
It definitely could. Also, if we see the junglers, meeting up, Talia is now level 6. And when you talk about different strengths, her ultimate provides the ability to roam so much quicker than Cassiopeia. But if Bjergsen gets there very quickly, when his ghost comes back up off cooldown or something, then in the straight up stand-up fight, definitely has the DPS advantage.
Exactly, and that's not even talking about the roaming phase of the game we're at right now. It was actually 5 minutes and 30 seconds in the last matchup where CLG had taken their dual lane and switched up top. So even though it is a fairly simple strategy to just swap once the turret fortification is down, there are still a bunch of mind games involved because if you leave too early, you could even lose your turret on the other side.
Definitely a bit of a different dynamic here. We already had the gank from CLG bot lane with Xmithy's invade. A lot of focus has been towards the top, but either time Darshan or Hanser have had each other pushed into the turret, so no real gank pressure has come of it. Hanser's been able to avoid the one, and something we talked about before as well is the pressure he can soak up for TSM.
Definitely true. And I have to say, one of the most important things about these two teams to me is the level of importance that both of these teams have put on mental fortitude, in especially this season. CLG, we talked about so much how they focused on teamwork, and they spent their whole last season retooling the whole team around that playstyle. TSM, hiring staff specifically to help them with, anti-tilt, basically.
Right.
And the mental fortitude in the game has really shown off. And I have to say, recovering after a remake like that in game number 1, and both teams playing really cautiously right now, just does prove the point here where both these teams are some of the most mentally strong teams that we do have in the North American LCS right now.
Yeah, and TSM getting a little bit of pressure in the jungle. It's again looking like CLG's playing a little bit passively. But to even continue on your point, Kobe, you look at CLG and the feature we saw on Huhi. When Aframu was talking about, they think Huhi's a good player, but Huhi doesn't know that, so they have to tell him. Well, especially when he can't play Rayleigh and Sol, it's important he continues to play confidently, as there's plays happening on both sides of the map.
Definitely read there by Rek'Sai. Spence used the ultimate, but bottom side!
Stixxay getting hit up, the exhaust is there. He still has flash, the heal goes down, fights across the map. Stixxay is gonna go down to first blood. That's Bjergsen coming up with a kill. Darshan answers back. The fight in the bottom is still going back and forth, and it's going to be double if down. Stixxay lived throughout it by holding the heal, holding the flash, and then fighting back.
Woo! Ridiculous. Across the map, 2 different victories here. CLG actually win the 2 versus 2. Everybody was giving it to Double Lift and Biofrost because of the strength there, but Aframu with the ultimate, that timely wish actually helps out both skirmishes.
Exactly.
7 summoner spells burned in the bottom lane alone.
Oh boy.
Darshan's got an angle on Haunter.
He has the barrel. He has the
too.
Oh, it's a hit for hit. He gets the orange in. It could be K. Burning. Bjergsen comes in and saves him. Oh my word.
Everybody's had that moment where you have the red buff burned on them, you throw your last auto and walk away,
pop
try
a
and be
potion
the
and
cool
squeeze.
guy. Not so cool there though. The citrus, the power of citrus prevails.
All right,
and
let's see
Haunter
this
walks
all over
away.
again. This was pretty chaotic.
Oh man, the pillar to start off, they get the snare, they even get the slow and exhaust there on the double lift, and the heal really turns it around on him.
Yeah, Stixxay can just flash follow as well as Aframu, and they go right onto double Jin traps, but it doesn't matter. With the damage down, Aframu can continue to heal up, and that really salvaged that play for CLG.
Meanwhile, though, TSM fans and CLG fans with a TSM fan inside of them can both be happy about the top lane side, where Bjergsen picked up a kill on Cassiopeia. He actually did get the first blood, so he got the bonus there as well for TSM, and Cassiopeia is where TSM want to play their game off of. So both teams actually getting a lot of money on the strengths that they have drafted towards.
Yeah, with the Abyssal Scepter completed in the tier already there, we're going to get to see this one more time as well. So this is where Spence jumps on a bit early, and Bjergsen gets here within good timing. He gets the damage for the ultimate on everyone. And we're actually going to get to see Haunter, who has his flashback.
It's going to be one of these games.
Where are you going to flash, bud?
Same focus here for CLG on top side diving.
Oh, he has the ult. He can throw down a little bit.
Flash there.
What a play! Has to watch the retaliation here. He gets himself out alive and throws up a barrel. The team, one side, like I said, he soaks up the pressure and does so much for the team.
CLG go back to the same strategy, the same draft. They roam to the top side. Again, Haunter lives, and they're not done yet.
And now they like to fuse in their favor. The shot's coming out, the curtain call. And they're gonna shove Stixxay off the stage.
It's because of the deferred pressure on the map. CLG used all of their eggs in top lane, and then because Stixxay and Aframu were just trying to salvage something, TSM was able to punish it. That's the team-wide communication and trust coming to fruition. Haunter survives the 3v1. The rest of the team capitalize.
Gangplank so good at absorbing pressure in the top side and punishing you on the opposite side. TSM got a Drake off that, plus a straggler kill there as they were able to chase down Stixxay. Really, really big swing for TSM. And they really did see that strategy coming once again as CLG used everything on the top side. I have to say, Haunter has done such a good job of saving that heal for the last second. It saved him twice. Darshan underestimated it before, walking away from the last auto. And then once again here, he eats the fruit at the exact same time he flashes under turret and survives and almost got a counter kill onto Huhi in a 3 versus 1 scenario.
Incredibly close, but the one thing that CLG can walk away with as a success there is they got an unanswered first turret. The dive that TSM did onto Stixxay was not a turret granting dive. Darshan has a Frozen Mallet completed now, which will be in a long lane, which means it's unlikely the top lane can get something back.
Yeah.
And with Soraka and Sivir, it's very difficult to push them in for the bottom side. So this could be an unanswered 1,000 plus gold because of the first turret for quite a while.
And we talk about that matchup, how Gangplank can get to what he wants to be, but that Frozen Mallet is finished very early. and now Haunter's gonna have a hard time doing pretty much anything. With Vision, makes it a bit easier, but just watch. This is exactly what he can do every time Haunter steps up to the plate.
Yeah, as far as unanswered, the importance of the Infernal Drake is actually twofold here for TSM because they do have all 3 lanes building extra damage as well. So it's very good early Drake for them in that trade. And we'll have to see if that does, turn out to have any issues here for CLG as, Double Lift on the Jhin has gotten to the early armor penetration. Jhin is one of the best champions to have an Infernal Drake on, and the Cull is about to pop for him as well. So we'll have to see if they start trying to use this Jhin ultimate to start picking people off, creating opportunities for themselves.
We spoke about it before, but the Jhin plus Gangplank is an incredible synergy. I think especially against Soraka. I think that's going to threaten Aphromo a lot.
That could be a position to start it with.
That could be the Jhin ult, then the Gangplank ult to follow if they want to finish him off. Could it be over the wall? They said we don't need it yet. Hold it, and TSM are sure to secure that kill.
Woo! That's not even having to deal with the Soraka through Wish as well. Burned a flash from Xmithy and the ult from Aphromo, still get the kill.
See, you have to be cognizant of that danger that we just talked about. When you're fighting for this Vision, it's very dangerous. That wasn't even Aphromo really getting caught. That was even the mobile jungler here. They were even trying to be safe, right? It's very difficult. You're playing against a Trundle Pillar, and the enemy team has these long-range Gangplank and Jhin ultimate abilities that can catch you out, even if you're not in TSM territory. So, very good pick there for TSM. They didn't really get an objective afterwards, but we did just get to see an example of that power being used.
It's really the first Bio Trundle we're seeing this season as well, not something he's put into his pocket for the picks he's been using. So coming out strong with the melees as well shows he can also diversify that champion pool. 3-2 now, 15.5 minutes in. We were talking about that 15-minute mark. It's usually about 1,600 plus for TSM, and that's where they found the bank account once again. Very strong early game. See if Darshan can keep holding those side waves and really allow CLG to come back here.
Yeah, Darshan is definitely the man CLG are looking to. He's got the CS lead on Gnar. He's got that kill money as well. All of that contributed to his early frozen mallet here, and he's trying to make his presence felt. We'll see if he can actually bully up here in the long lane and try and create anything. As we said, though, Gangplank, Ultimate is so good at trying to answer cross map.
Yeah, and something these teams need to think about as well is how are they going to create their advantages and ultimately win the game? You look at CLG, they have not the greatest ways of getting onto Haunter or Bjergsen. Like, if they can't actually get onto Bjergsen, it's going to be very difficult for them to end the game. And then TSM, likewise, they're the long-range pick team. I think that's the way they get it, because otherwise, the disengage from Sivir and Soraka and Gragas is going to be pretty immense. We may be in for a long game if these teams don't go incredibly aggressive.
It seems that CLG has kind of tempered themselves a bit. We saw a lot more action from lane to lane, and actually more turrets dropped, so that kind of escalated it as well. And here things have slowed down a bit as TSM gain a lead. And Haunter keeps soaking up CS in the top lane. He's going to catch up quite soon.
Teams are going for plays on opposite sides of the map right now, so that means CLG have to recall their bottom lane. They're sending so many people top that their bottom lane's got to be the target. They know this. TSM have full vision coverage, and it will just be the trade of objectives. Good job by them recognizing that they're overloading that other side of the map, and they need to back off. Again, the importance of that wave clear with the Gangplank.
Yeah, and it's actually not a trade yet because they didn't get that bottom lane turret, and they're wondering whether or not who he should pull back. I think eventually they can pressure it, but that requires some really deep vision in the TSM jungle and a large commitment to get an interior turret. So far, it's actually just a positive trade for TSM, and they're in position for the respawning Drake, which is a mount.
So much vision for TSM setting up for this Drake. And the other thing that you were kind of touching on earlier, how you thought it might be a long game if they don't go aggressive. TSM is the team that want to kite back through their Gangplank barrels, their Cassiopeia, and their pillar spam. So the Drake is just so hard to contest there. You have to give it up if you're CLG. You can't afford to check into the fog of war versus a team like TSM have built here, and they want to try and kite backwards.
Yeah. A lot of wards as well. Look at the bottom side of that map. It's like a light bright right now. TSM side. Going to be towards the top side for CLG. Kind of playing process of elimination here.
Whoa!
Wards on the bot as well. Equinox onto Bjergsen. He's silenced out. And Biofrost is going a little bit harder there. Bjergsen's backed, and they can't really continue on this. Really just added pressure from the curtain call. And CLG is getting the Herald for Darshan, who again is going to be big in those sides.
Yeah, that's going to be a big pickup for them. As we said, this is the guy they're trying to play around, so they're putting more effort into that, putting more resources into Darshan with the Glimpse of the Void. That's going to further empower, his split push and his 1v1 ability. I have to say, Aframu being on Soraka there did save CLG's butt in that pick because it could heal up, and the Jhin ultimate obviously does more damage the less health you have, so Soraka has to keep topping people off to reduce the further incoming damage of Jhin.
Huhi took a lot of hits from that ultimate, and it was like, oh, it's full health, it's great. It wasn't even a problem.
Yeah, the problem really comes up when Soraka's the one getting shot, because she can't heal herself, and she's very slow, and she has to only use her flash to get away from Trundle Pillars, so Aframu is really the guy that has to be most worried about his positioning, because if he's the one getting shot, then they're going to have a lot of issues.
Also incredibly aware of those situations. Something like that happens in the blink of an eye, and you got to be ready to have a cross-map save.
Yeah. Stixay pop the Sivir ult and like, run, Afro, run, because you better...
Yeah, right? You're always going faster. Speedy, medical Soraka. 20 minutes coming up on the clock, and TSM, #1 and first Drakes in the game, and they continue that throughout here against CLG in the playoffs. Also grabbing a mountain as well, so once they start to approach the turrets, Chronologic Gaming might have some trouble.
Yeah, I like what TSM are doing, actually. They continually position Haunter into the lane to try and wave clear, and then overload the other side of the map to get these turret trades. And then, in each of those trades, they get a little bit of tempo. Bjergsen actually roamed up to that top side to make sure it did happen this time around. But this time, Stix and Aframu, they zone Haunter off the turret, and CLG should probably be able to get that answer, even though Rek'Sai ults down.
Yeah, they'd have to be a little bit careful, because if Rek'Sai ulted down and the GP teleported behind them, they'd be in a pretty sticky situation. But that's why CLG have brought Xmithy and Huhi into the jungle, just to kind of be insurance in case something like that happens, and to maintain their one turret advantage on the map.
All right, now they're being a little bit adventurous, though, because they don't have wards in this bottom side, and the rest of TSM have started to rotate down towards them, so CLG can't really stick around for extra pushing here, and it is intelligent that they do back off now.
This is a really tense game. You also have to consider the mental strength of these teams having to go through the remake. I really credit CLG for just kind of swapping in the Taliyah instead of the Aurelion Sol. The team fighting, I feel like, towards the end isn't going to be as strong for them, so it puts more of an emphasis on Huhi to try and make these side lane plays, which hasn't happened yet, because you think about a late game team fight, a Weaver's Wall flying into a Cassiopeia is just a wall. Like, the Taliyah is gone if she follows that in.
Yeah. If we already, start look at the scaling for each of these teams, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Stixay's shoulders, because Stixay is the late game carry for this team. He's on the Sivir. He's actually off to a very good start, so that's not too bad for CLG. He did get one of their 2 kills, and he has the 2 item components of the core items for Sivir. Once he does get the Infinity Edge to top it off, he can actually carry team fights if Hufi just controls the zoning for him. And allows him to get off a lot of those ricochet autos as well as boomerangs. But Gangplank ultimate once again.
Vince Karen goes right on to Stixay, working the ground as Huhi from the back here. And now it's going to be a big cast from Xmithy before he goes down. All of TSM come out pretty unscathed and look for more.
CLG had arrived to that turret early and really wanted to finish it, but they did not give enough respect to the GP and Jhin catch right there. All it took was that one shot landing on Aframu, and he was gone. And now TSM are the ones that are getting the mid lane turret, maybe 2.
You guys know that it's going to be difficult when they can get Aframu with that front end damage. He goes down, and everybody else runs for the hills. You can see how hurt Huhi is on this one. So CLG not giving respect to TSM towards their side of the map, and it cost them.
To CLG's credit, they had rotated early. They just had to fall back a little bit earlier before the turret was there. Once Svenskeren is able to go in on the GP ultimate, they can knock Stixay up while he's in there. Xmithy was trying to tank them up, but he was also dying to Bjergsen, so he had to eventually let a shot through to Aframu, which was fatal on that side, and they both go down.
Not really allowing Darshan any time to get into the fight. CLG has to recognize that's where a lot of their power is here in this game. Mid turret still prepped to go down, so gold for CLG to pick up there. They just have to be very careful about how they go about it, as TSM will be ready for the attack. About a 3,000, 4,000 gold lead really here for TSM as they continue to control the game. They just haven't really taken that control into their favor yet. They're allowing CLG to just come at them as they are that counterattack team.
That was super interesting. Bjergsen actually sacked that mid lane turret because no local gold were over to CLG. So overall, it's a denial, but temporarily it's gold for CLG.
Yeah, a few hundred gold there denied, but the gap actually opening up is pretty good for CLG. As this Drake is about to spawn, they put down a pink ward on it, so they're trying to set up for this fight. They want this fight to be the one where they come back into the game. They don't want to let TSM continue to control the Drakes. Watch the Gangplank ultimate once again, though. They're going to try and use that to get damage on the back line and soften them up for Jhin.
And also pay attention to Meganar and also where Xsmithy's ultimate will knock people. If Xsmithy can get Bjergsen into the fight, there's no cleanse, and even if he has flash, he may be dead by the time he can react.
Good choice there from TSM to actually control the mid wave and pressure CLG on their secondary turret rather than feeding into the Fog of War at Dragon. Now, step 2, they can just move in, clear out those wards, and claim the Drake as well.
And you cannot face check into a Gangplank and a Cassiopeia, plus the Trundle and Jhin to run them down. So by pushing out the mid lane there, TSM was able to swoop back down and just outmaneuver CLG for the Drake. They were able to do it because they're stronger right now, but it was still a very nice map move by TSM.
So if that map move were kind of be disregarded, what is CLG's option there? Or is the move they did just have to be done? Whoa! Never mind. The next move from TSM is even more right than the first one. They get 2 kills. And you don't even have to answer that.
Yeah, the problem with picking Cassiopeia like that, you know, with the seismic shove, you have to turn your back as soon as you seismic shove her in, because you have to expect, you know, once Bjergsen gets shoved under the turret there, that's going to be his immediate reaction. But he just gets the double stun there. They get a double kill, and CLG need a miracle steal.
I talked about TSM not fully taking control of the game, but there they have taken hold of it completely. Terms of their own attack, and then on the terms of their own Baron. We'll see it once more here.
Kuhi had gotten hit up by the Jhin to begin with, so that was a pick one way or the other because they had split to do the 1-3-1, but they didn't have the safety in the mid lane in which to disengage. And because of the double Mountain Drake, the Baron was paper afterwards.
Yeah, there's just so much threat with this Jhin. You know, even when off screen, Doublelift doesn't have to be in the screen, and CLG still have to respect members of TSM looking for duels like that, because the long range damage right now, you know, he's got all this extra flat armor penetration, and he'll shred anyone on the front line of CLG. So it makes it very difficult to try and take those stand-up fights with anyone that TSM decides to pick.
I also have to commend TSM for their confidence in their own versatility. Throughout the regular split, maybe you could have criticized them for being too cookie cutter with their drafts and playing smaller champion pools. And even though Trundle and Jhin are common champions in League of Legends, they're actually 2 champions TSM hadn't played in the entire split.
Whoa!
That's a thing.
Yes, sir. Darshan teleports immediately out because they saw TSM leave bottom lane. He's just like, nope, nope, nope. Not going to stick around. He does get that solo kill gold.
Yep.
However, CLG are going to have to try and wave clear here with Baron buff still on TSM. It looks like taking out Gangplank is enough to do it. So that was a very key outplay from Darshan, a very key solo kill for himself. As we said, it's going to be CLG having to play to their strengths here with Darshan and with Gnar. And this basically saved them not only the bottom lane pressure, but also the mid turret. That turret would have died to the push of TSM were not for Darshan relieving pressure.
What's up? You have Baron, I have Rift Herald. Let's fight.
Yeah, and he's Gnar with the frozen mouth.
And you're Gnar. So we will see what kind of options TSM can provide for themselves here.
He's still Gnar, but there's a lot more people here.
Oh, they knew he just Gnar'd back down to Mini, if that's a thing. So they get themselves right in and out of that play, not even within aggro range of the turret. So that's going to fall in their favor here. Like we said, TSM starting to take control. And now in the bot lane, it looks like this second turret will fall, the first inhibitor of the game. And it does not look like CLG will be able to do much. They may put up an ult from Smithy here to get Monster in. Hello and goodbye as they drink him under the table.
Called it, Riv, right there. Smithy, good ultimate. And CLG already able to get 1 kill. The Sivir ult was used here. Can they chase down another? They're cutting him off.
It's gonna be tricky. They
the
have
bounces
to get right onto him.
Nice boomerang as well. Working the ground as he goes the other way, trying to stay within that passive wall movement, but they don't want the full chase. Like we said, it's still difficult to walk into a team like TSM, even on the chase. So CLG say, we're good with protecting the base. We'll set up some more defense here.
So they have to be incredibly careful against Bjergsen when chasing in, who is becoming a monster on Cassiopeia. But as long as they can keep getting picks on what is mainly a squishy triple threat team composition for TSM, they're going to be able to continue to prolong this game. And that was an incredibly dangerous situation. One of the main ways CLG can prolong this game is by having split push pressure with Darshan. The way you beat that is you kill a split push pressure, and then you try and push 5v4. TSM had done all the prior steps properly, but then Hanser gets caught out. Xsmithy had a great play, and it has to reset once again.
Yeah, both teams have really played to that teleport style. Bring it to the teleporter, not to the other side of the map so he can teleport. It's been done on Hanser in the early game, and now for Darshan here towards the late. 29 minutes as we come up to crest, 38-4. And it's 56,000 to, we'll give CLG 49 as we round up. The huge lead here as TSM continues to be able to replicate this early game play style. Always find somewhat of a lead, even if their turrets are being taken down, even if it seems like they're being worked around the map. Now to try and steal the blue away from Guhi, and they will be successful. That Jhin ultimate opening up. We see that between the Ashe and the Jhin lately, and I'm actually starting to favor the Jhin a little bit more. You miss an Ashe arrow, and it's kind of, you miss a Jhin shot, you have a few more to slow it, even AoE style, and continue that fight for your team. And TSM has one that can catch up nicely.
Well, as of right now, CLG are going to have to turtle inside their base, play defensively, watch out for that long-range damage of TSM. You know, during that time, Darshan's going to try and split push, but he doesn't have teleport to get back. So they're just trying to wave clear here. Luckily, you know, CLG, they obviously do have the Sivir, which is very good at it, and Talia in the mid lane. And with Baron being taken very recently, they don't have to worry about that. This Draco, though, has to be forfeit. I don't really know if they can actually afford to risk another team fight loss. That might be the game if they lose another one.
I feel like CLG should actually just try and get as much wave pressure and wards in the Baron area as possible while TSM is taking this third Mountain Drake. As far as Drake stacking goes, 2 Mountain Drakes versus 3 Mountain Drakes means you're either killing Baron instantly or almost instantly. So there's not that much of a difference as far as the strength, in my opinion.
Yeah, the focus of this game right now is on the next team fight, right? The next one is going to be what breaks this thing wide open. And CLG don't have too many more chances. TSM have accumulated a very big lead here. They have a lot of map control as well. So CLG are going to have to make a very quick decision during the next team fight and just run in with the Sivir and make one of those surgical plays here. Darshan's level 16 now on the Nard, does have his flash ready, so they can try and isolate some of these squishy members. As you said, TSM, they're a team with triple threat, so if you get the jump on someone, you can try and kill them quickly, but TSM looking very strong.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a dream scenario for COG's team fight, and it's basically if Talia can get a nice wall across TSM that segments some of them away, and then Darshan can Mega Gnar into that and get a massive ultimate on many people. The problem with that is it's been so long since we've seen a fight. Like, TSM can flash away. So you have to find a way to get the flashes first and then pull off the combo, which is, like Kobe says, why TSM is looking so strong and very likely to win this game.
It's one of the reasons why I love seeing Talia in game is because a creative ultimate can change a 6,000 gold lead and completely make it a much different fight if you can separate the team from each other. Something you can create by yourself is very, very strong. It's just who he has to put himself in a pretty dangerous position to do that.
Definitely true. Most positions right now are very dangerous for Hui and CLG as TSM have deep wards. Look at all these deep wards.
Oh, there's the pillar. He can't even ult to get out of this one. He would have knocked off the Surf right away. Alframu saves himself with the ultimate as well as some damage from that star call, and everybody continues to get pushed out here as TSM is just roughhousing CLG in their own jungle.
And Bjergsen solo killed Darshan on the other side of the wall right there. So that was CLG attempting to pull off and just completely flopping. TSM way stronger and looking poised to win the game.
Bing, bang, boom. Takes him down. The inhibitor follows right after with its turret, and they could be looking to go for the Nexus turrets here. Really lighting a fire under themselves to come into this little bit of a remake game. Both teams coming out very strong, and TSM is going to try and find the Nexus here in game 1, 11-4, as they battled it out in CLG in the early game. We're gonna have to see how much closer this series can get. We are gonna be going game 2, as TSM is up 1 game.
And TSM has to feel quite happy about that game. Hanser dodged a ton of pressure from COG. Bjergsen was dominant in the mid lane, and Doublelift and Biofrost were pivotal in getting picks for TSM to close out this game in pretty quick fashion. 33 minutes, 15 seconds.
Yeah, with both teams being confident and sticking to the same strategy that they attempted in the draft for the first game that was going to happen, we saw it play out really similar to the opening lines of the first game. And then TSM with a very big push in that mid game and really utilizing the Jhin ultimate for all of the picks that we saw. You know, even though Doublelift hasn't played it in the LCS, definitely finding the mark in this game.
A lot of the times of what we saw in this one is Darshan now coming kind of back to form, but it seems like the team is almost giving him too much. As he would pull up to Hanser in that lane, he'd get more of the team when he's almost like, hey guys, I want to party alone up here.
So I keep talking about, the different strengths of the GP and NAR matchups. We did get to see it pretty clearly in this game.
All right, so now let's check in with Dash, Mark, and Crumbs for more on that TSM win.
Thank you very much, Riv. After a remake of the initial first game, TSM does come out victorious in game 1 here in their series against CLG. As Jap mentioned, pretty dominant and pretty quick game, 33 minutes, clocking in right about there. Let's talk Champ Select, if only so briefly, because really only one adjustment was made between the initial Champ Select and the second Champ Select, in that CLG last picks the Talia in place of the Aurelion Sol as he is disabled.
I have a lot of respect for both of these teams going for the same draft. While they might both have said, hey, we really like their compositions, let's just keep them together. The fact that you don't switch anything up after both teams revealing their hands is kind of a good show of sportsmanship, sticking to something and accepting that the unfortunate circumstance happened and then just playing through it. I
think one thing I like, too, is that it gives both teams a little bit more data on the matchups that they played. So bot lane, I think, even though TSM might have died, they see the matchup isn't that bad. They weren't getting crushed by the Soraka.
Right.
On the flip side, CLG knows that Hanser is doing fine on the GP. Maybe time did not let him get that. So it's almost like they played 2 early games with the same champions minus the mid lane matchup.
Yeah, and both times we saw Hanser operating just fine in that GP versus NAR matchup.
Too fine.
Right. And so that's where we'll get to, whether or not that's a result of his phenomenal play or CLG not punishing enough that GP pick into, say, the NAR early. We'll get to that. Before we do, let's talk about the early game. 9 minutes in, we've got a 2-for-1 cross map here. CLG comes out the better of it in this engagement early on.
Invade from CLG. They were trying to make a roam towards the top side as the wave was crashing, but Bjergsen and Svenskeren are already there, and they have their number. Nice little flash ult, but unfortunately, the Cassio damage is way too high, and they're going to trade 1-for-1, I believe.
Yeah. It's a 1-for-1, and then there's also this fight that just started off on the bot side at the same time. And this is one that actually is going to go in favor of CLG. It's looking really bad initially, but this is the Soraka for you. You're
fighting in the creep wave too.
Yeah, the creep wave as well, and so it ends up being a pretty big fight for them. And the nice thing is that the Soraka ult kind of timed in with the fight that was happening topside. So it was like you kind of saw the power of the Soraka here, but outside of laning phase, it's not as strong versus pick comp where they're just going to keep shooting stuff at the Soraka without ever having to really commit to her.
The Trundle is just so powerful against 3 immobile characters that have no way to actually get past Pillar. Pillar hits the Soraka, the Talia, or the Sivir, immediately you have to pop ultimate. You have to be worried about GP. You literally get my ass met on top of you and you're done.
Right, well, at least if you're a Lucian, you can dash through that pillar after it hits the first time. But yeah, as you mentioned, Sivir with no actual move blocks has to blow the ultimate just for the move speed to get to safety.
And the big thing about Soraka is, and why she's so strong, especially against lower skill teams, is because you have to commit to try and kill her generally. Like, you need your tanks to go in and get the engage off, and if you flub that and Soraka lives, it's terrible. With this comp that TSM has, they don't actually need to commit physically. They can shoot their ultimates, and if they miss, it's like, well, we're not that close to you. Like a GP barrel doesn't put you next to them, a Jhin ult doesn't put you next to them, and it was such a good comp crafted by TSM on your screen there.
Yeah, very much so, and I want to continue talking about that composition to basically talk about, in a sense, how they win the game. Because I think a lot of people, initially, you look at this composition, and we mentioned they don't have a ton of go buttons. So there were questions raised about, well, how exactly does TSM actually end a game? How do they, get advantages for themselves? But man, were they playing that pick game beautifully, only taking, 1 or 2 man advantages. They didn't need to win full 5v5 aces or anything to get what they wanted on the map.
It was really standard. You get picks, you transition into objectives. Once again, the RNG gods for them, triple mountain Inferno. I mean, you cannot get better than that. Yep. They're able to just convert into Barons eventually after a nice little 2 picks into the mid lane. So just punishing the mistakes from CLG has, and to be honest, a lot of their advantages just come from laning. If you're picking Gangplank and you're pretty much not dying to Gnar, you've won the lane and you've done half the diligence.
We saw Impact in that same lane yesterday, and even having died a couple times as the GP, we were like, he is playing this matchup phenomenally because he's only died a couple times and he's staying up in farm. Haunter's not even dying and he's winning in farm. What the heck is going on?
Well, I think that's kind of the big difference between the Taliyah and the Aurelion Sol. You can see that like at 4:30 in the first game, Aurelion Sol can roam a lot easier, whereas Taliyah kind of wants her 6 to do it. And when they make that first play on the top side, it's so much later into the game. It's a little bit more telegraphed. And CLG is able to get countered by TSM.
All right, now I want to push this a little bit further forward as we see CLG here, Darshan on your screen. Thinking about game 1, how they might adjust for game 2, but I want to dive back into play here mid lane. TSM 2 for 0 in the mid lane. We see exactly this, that sniping capabilities of the Jhin on top of all of the slows that can come out of both the Trundle and the GPs.
Pillar and GPO, you got nowhere to run, and all three of the carries and the supports have absolutely no answers to getting out of that. So I think that the Gangplank and the Trundle have just been so important for TSM in this composition to deal with the likes of CLG that, frankly, I just don't see how they could have won a 5v5.
I think they need to split push a little bit more. You see in that replay, Darshan had just gotten to the side where didn't have any pressure yet, and CLG was kind of rushing to finish the mid turret off.
All right, so maybe a split push to avoid some of that pressure. I want to push us forward to the final fight of the game. TSM already with, solid control of this game, as you mentioned, having picked up 4 dragons plus a Baron, but here this will be the fight to close it out.
Yeah, once again, as Crumbs to point out, the Trundle Pillar just pushes Taliyah right back in. Darshan been hoping to flank, runs into Bjergsen. That's a pretty strong snake. So, yeah, once again, just like 2 or 3 kills, and then they go and push up mid and end the game. It's not like they were crushing these 5v5 massive team fights. It was small advantage, small advantage, small advantage, which is kind of the story of TSM all season.
All right, so here we are, Crumbs, moving into game 2 after the remake with Aurelion Sol disabled. As Mark mentioned, we've now seen the early levels played out twice, which gives an interesting sample size to the teams when they gear up and decide what they're going to do for game 2. CLG has selected blue. Champion select. How do they attack it this time around and maybe dismantle this strategy that TSM put together?
Well, the Gangplank, for me, is the big... Gangplank and Trundle are the 2 big standouts because Trundle does really well into the Sivir lane, especially if you pick a Soraka that's not such a strong of a bully lane. But in particularly, Gangplank hasn't necessarily been the biggest Darshan champion all split long.
Right.
If in the time of practice they've been able to pull this out and make sure they can work on this pick in particular, that makes it a lot easier for them to first pick that. Otherwise, just drop more bans. It's a best of 5, so you have room to experiment. And I'm not a big fan of where teams pigeonhole themselves to do the same bans over and over and over without willing to force the opponent to show their hand.
Right, I think CLG has to try and open something up for themselves to give themselves a really powerful first pick, like the GP, and if that doesn't go through, something else, because I don't think Sivir alone is like, oh, let's first pick Sivir and then we're great. So.
All right, so being blue side, they got to pinch something ultra important in that first pick. Now, we've got more League of Legends just around the corner, so stay tuned to see if Counterlogic Gaming will tie the series or if TSM will snag a 2-game lead. The NA El Clasico returns in just a few minutes. They tried to throw me the